Hi, and welcome to the show. Today's show is going to be a little controversial. I want to ask the question, what are Shir and Satanism? Now, in the Sufi tradition, Shir refers to an association or partnership. It's also a warning against serving more than one power. But the accusation of Shir, unfortunately, has suffered weaponization, much like the accusation of Satanism in Christianity. Obviously, there's a lot of, if you like, political skullduggery. Organized religions do want their congregation to only worship one God, preferably theirs, because, quite simply, that's where the power, the control, and the money lies. However, many organized religions see the worship of others' gods, such as jinn or Satanism, or the worship of Iblis. Hence, they accuse people of worshipping gods, and they call this a heinous action, whilst absolving their religion of terrible crimes. Some stretch back to almost prehistory. However, these acts still influence modern clergy and holy orders today. So while people imagine Satanism or Iblis or evil to have some kind of archetype, the Christian one, of course, is the red man carrying the pitchfork with the goat's head. Iblis, he is seen more as a power. These archetypes are, if you like, pardon the pun, are a type of red herring. Let me explain more. People imagine Satan, Iblis, as a being, but it's not. It's not a being. It's a behavior pattern. Quite simply, it's a way of organizing power. It doesn't matter if it's a religious institution or a political institution. Organizing power is the invisible virus that runs through any organization. So what does that mean to us? Well, essentially, we are given that the power is all-encompassing, but quite often this power lacks any morality, and because it lacks any morality, it decreases empathy. Let me explain. There is a golden rule. It's mentioned in the Bible. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Matthew 7:12, Luke 6:31. This isn't a sectarian law, and it's not really to do with any one religion. It's to do with the heart of morality. When you live this law, you have morality. So therefore, you have more freedom because you have a strong morality, because it's rooted in empathy. If you don't have that strong freedom, you have rules and you have blind obedience. And the more rules and blind obedience you have, realistically, the less freedom you have. Thank you for watching the program. If you've enjoyed the program, please understand that I put a lot of time and research into each program. I'm an academic, so essentially all the research is double and triple checked. So everything on this platform is free. A lot of the information is very difficult to acquire, but I find it. Now, if you like my work, I will leave you my Bootsy channel address. You can leave a donation there. Patreon doesn't really work in Ukraine, unfortunately. But it'd be very nice, and it's good for you. You leave a donation, you get the magazine, and the magazine is written by myself, and there's a lot of information there about jinn, about occultism and philosophy. Thank you for listening to me, and namaste. So how is this instilled into us? Well, essentially, many things become thought crimes, either politically or in a religious sense. Within Christianity, we have something called the 7 deadly sins. We also have the commandments. But unfortunately, these sins and commandments become inverted into surveillance. Even worse, they are self-surveillance, which is incredibly dangerous to freedom, because any fact or any thought can be reinterpreted or rewritten, obviously to suit a corrupted agenda. It's not just me who's saying this. If we look at the great novels, say for example Orwell's 1984 or Animal Farm, he anticipated the idea of thought crime. You have to read these books to understand this, but you were not allowed to think against the narrative or against the machine. This was not allowed in the story. This is very different to say if we look at the works of Jesus, who declared that lust in the heart was the same as adultery. How is that different? Well, this is acts against human nature, if you wish. You know, most people find someone attractive or not attractive. Because somebody can lust after somebody, it doesn't mean to say they are going to break every conceivable law to establish that moment of lust. Far from it. So this is the problem with any kind of thought crime, because anything can become criminalized. You know, this can be seen in real time even now. If we look at China and we look at the UK, both countries imprison now for people posting online. Now, essentially, it's just a post, it's just an idea. But of course, it's ideas which confront the machine, confront the everyday thought. Thank you for watching so far. I want to add that I'm starting a kind of a circle, people who want to learn how to contact the jinn. I've left all the details in the description. Thank you for listening, and namaste. We have to understand how this comes about. Well, it comes about through very inflexible do's and don'ts. But in another way, they're also very flexible. So an ideology introduces to you a do or a don't. It doesn't matter if this ideology is political or religious. They will change it because that's what happens with any democracy. I believe it was Chomsky who said that when democracy is under attack, they always change language. So we have to understand that not only are we taught how to think, we're also manipulated by psychology into being frightened to think. And this same psychology is enacted to make people follow orders without question. So what are the scripts for this following orders without question? Well, one of the easiest script to understand, of course, is the 7 deadly sins: pride, grief, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, sloth. They're not really crimes in any legal sense. They are mental crimes. They are states of being. But by branding them as deadly, the church always had a permanent shadow of guilt and control. And if we look at, say, the 10 Commandments, the first 4 are not about ethics at all. They're about loyalty, oaths, no other gods, no idols, no blasphemy, keep the Sabbath. Even among the reigning 6, coverted. I covert. I want. It's not an act, it's gain, it's a thought. Once again, we see how imagination is policed. It's a shame when desire and imagination and questioning are condemned, because these are the building blocks of us. Without desire and imagination, we would still, as a species, be climbing around the trees. As human beings, we would probably still be living at home with mother. The point is, desire and imagination are essential parts of human psychology. So, if these are taken away from the individual can never be free, and they will always live under the weight of perpetual guilt. So how is this mechanism of control enacted? Well, quite simply, it's enacted by people following blindly. And they follow blindly because the rules say it's bad. But they're not allowed to question the rules. For example, if we, say, look at famous authors like Kafka, he showed this in the trial. The accused man never learns of his crime. His guilt is invisible. His sentence is inevitable. He's trapped in a faceless system that demands obedience to rules without explanation. This is once again happening throughout Europe. Again, to do with posts. If you are seen to have posted incorrectly, you can be stripped of all your internet rights and banking rights, and you may never know what you have done wrong. So you have to bear this in mind. You know, these old traits of religion and authority, they haven't got away. If anything, they become turbocharged. Now, if we're going to talk about turbocharged tyranny, and we're going to discuss what is it like to live under a regime which quite simply will destroy you for even thinking the wrong way, we have to look at Solzhenitsyn. Every human being on the planet should read the Gulag Archipelago. In this book, ordinary men become executioners just by following orders. And ironically, ordinary women signed papers that condemned neighbours to prison. This wasn't just the Soviet system. The same system happened in Germany. Quite simply, if women didn't like another woman, they would gang up and write to the authorities, and the woman would be taken away for no better reason than the women didn't like her. But because the rules were there and they were flexible and inflexible, and the machine needs feeding, it became inevitable. This really is Satanism as behavior. It's not rebellion, it's blind obedience. It's not horns and fire, but it's the quiet compliance with the rules, divorce from morality, and enforced by fear of invisible transgression. Thank you for watching the program. If you've enjoyed the program, please understand that I put a lot of time and research into each program. I'm an academic, so essentially all the research is double and triple checked. So everything on this platform is free. A lot of the information is very difficult to acquire, but I find it. Now, if you like my work, I will leave you my Bootsy channel address. You can leave a donation there. Patreon doesn't really work in Ukraine, unfortunately. But it would be very nice, and it's good for you. You leave a donation, you get the magazine, and the magazine is written by myself, and there's a lot of information there about jinn, about occultism and philosophy. Thank you for listening to me, and namaste. How else does evil work? I hinted at it earlier on. I said it's quite simply the fact that the rules seem rigid one moment and then flexible the next. We would call this reclassification and division. Evil always begins with reclassification. We saw this in the early 1900s when all drugs were classified as illegal. Yeah, let that sink in. Before, I think it was 1920, you could go to any chemist, buy any drug that you want, and it was legal. After 1920, it became illegal. You became demonized. You became known as evil. You became known as less than human. But this trick was learned many, many years before that. The Crusaders were the heroes of the church, and anybody who resisted them were heretics, blasphemers, outsiders, traitors. Does it still happen today? Of course. Businesses call the expendable non-developers, or I believe another catchphrase is useless eaters. So the axis of division has always been Satanism in disguise. It appears justified as wars, inquisitions, crusades. And because it's organized, they justify the foulest deeds by promising reward. It could be financially, it could be promotion, it could be heavenly. It doesn't matter, but all these rewards have one thing in common, and that is earthly slaughter. Now, you probably think that I'm being a little bit extreme, but in our times we see it again. During COVID, non-participants of the narrative were branded as threats, criminals, even murderers. Even Chomsky spoke about throwing people in concentration camps. Many so-called Karens would scream about killing people who wouldn't have injections. Once again, it was about classification. It was about power. So what is the solution? Well, the solution has been mentioned. I am by no means a Christian, but the golden rule: treat people as you wish to be treated yourself, because this gives you the opportunity to be moral. Many of the rules we have are not moral. You know, they don't have any empathy, but they rely on obedience. And this is where really Satanism begins. It begins with reclassification. Satanism is never about rebellion. It's always about reclassification. And in turn, many religions have used this division as their axis of belief. Saved versus the damned, believer versus the infidel, the chosen versus the rejected. But when we divide humanity, this is when Satanism enters. So always try to remember the golden rule remains the only compass that breaks the cycle of Satanism or Iblis worship. It does not demand blind obedience. It demands recognition of the other as self. Let that sink in. When we see others less than human, we have already entered a satanic state. But when we hold the golden rule, that is our compass, that is our morality. Because thought crimes, seeing somebody as subjugated, goes. Seeing people as the same, treating them the same as you will treat yourself, is the doorway to freedom. Thank you for listening, and namaste. Thank you for watching the program. If you've enjoyed the program, please understand that I put a lot of time and research into each program. I'm an academic, so essentially all the research is double and triple checked. So everything on this platform is free. A lot of the information is very difficult to acquire, but I find it. Now, if you like my work, I will leave you my Bootsy channel address. You can leave a donation there. Patreon doesn't really work in Ukraine, unfortunately. But it would be very nice, and it's good for you. You leave a donation, you get the magazine, and the magazine is written by myself, and there's a lot of information there about jinn, about occultism and philosophy. Thank you for listening to me, and namaste.